Russia is facing a crisis it never thought would hit so hard. Not a shortage of oil, not a shortage of gas, but of something far more vital: water. In the occupied Donbas region, nearly 2 million people are now without reliable access to clean water, and the disaster is unfolding in real time. At the heart of this crisis lies the collapse of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbas Canal and the failure of Russia's so-called Lifeline pipeline project. What was promised as a solution has become a nightmare. For decades, the canal was the beating heart of Donbas. Built to channel fresh water from the Seversky Donets River, it supplied households, industries, and entire cities. But when the war began in 2014, the canal became a target. Sections were damaged, pumping stations abandoned, and maintenance turned into an impossible task. By the time Russia annexed the region in 2022, the system was already on life support. Moscow knew the canal could not survive, but instead of rebuilding it, the Kremlin pushed forward with a new plan: an emergency water pipeline from the Don River. The announcement was grand. Russian state TV called it an engineering triumph, a project that would guarantee stability for Donetsk and Luhansk. But reality tells a different story. The pipeline was rushed, built under chaotic conditions, and plagued with corruption. Reports confirm that materials were substandard, contractors cut corners, and output was far below what was promised. What was supposed to deliver millions of cubic meters of water became nothing more than a political stunt. And now, the consequences are catastrophic. Cities like Donetsk, Mariupol, and Kharkiv are running dry. Taps don't flow, water trucks can't keep up, and entire communities are rationing every drop. Residents line up with plastic buckets, waiting hours just to collect a few liters. Imagine a modern European city, but people living as if it were the 19th century. This is the chilling reality today. The canal has collapsed. The pipeline has failed, and the Kremlin's credibility is crumbling along with it. What was meant to show Russia's power now exposes its weakness. The question is no longer when water will return, but whether Moscow can provide it at all. When a war-torn region runs out of water, it's not just an inconvenience, it becomes a humanitarian catastrophe. Right now, in occupied Donbas, more than 2 million civilians are caught in a crisis that feels like the slow tightening of a noose. Every drop of water has turned into a matter of survival. Picture this: long lines of people stretching down broken streets, each carrying buckets, bottles, and makeshift containers, waiting for trucks that may or may not arrive. Some queue for 5 to 6 hours just to collect 10 liters of water, barely enough for a family of 4 to survive a single day. And when the trucks run late, tempers flare, mothers beg, children cry, and soldiers sometimes step in to control desperate crowds. This is not a scene from a distant desert. It's happening today, in Europe, in the shadow of war. The crisis has seeped into every corner of daily life. Hospitals are struggling to keep up with even the most basic needs. Surgeries are delayed because sterilization requires clean water. Patients are told to bring their own bottles just to get IV fluids prepared. Imagine being critically ill and being asked to fetch water before you can be treated. That's how dire things have become. Schools are no better. Children attend classes without functioning toilets or drinking fountains. Teachers report students fainting from dehydration. Families often have to decide, do we use our last few liters to drink, to cook, or to wash? Hygiene collapses, and with it, the threat of disease rises. Outbreaks of stomach infections and skin diseases are already being reported. Industry, once the backbone of Donbas, has ground to a halt. Steel plants, chemical factories, and coal mines all depend on water for cooling, cleaning, and processing. Without it, they can't operate. Workers are sent home, unemployment grows, and frustration builds. An economic collapse is adding fuel to an already desperate humanitarian fire. But perhaps the most dangerous impact is psychological. The people feel abandoned. They see Moscow's promises broken, their basic needs ignored, and their suffering dismissed as temporary difficulties. In reality, these are not temporary, they are life-threatening. And every day that passes without a solution deepens the resentment, the anger, and the cracks in Russia's control over the region. This is not just about water, it's about dignity, survival, and the breaking point of human endurance. And in Donbas today, that breaking point is dangerously close. Water shortages don't just create humanitarian suffering, they ripple outward into politics, strategy, and power. In the occupied Donbas, the failure of Russia's canal and pipeline projects is becoming more than a logistical issue, it's turning into a political disaster that Moscow cannot easily control. From the start, the Kremlin promised stability. It told residents of Donetsk and Luhansk that joining Russia would mean safety, progress, and infrastructure. Instead, what they have now is empty taps and broken promises. Every day without water chips away at the carefully built narrative of Moscow as a protector. Instead of gratitude, people feel betrayal. Instead of loyalty, they feel anger. And in a region already torn apart by war, that anger is dangerous. For local leaders installed by Russia, the crisis is a ticking time bomb. They stand before cameras, blaming Ukraine for cutting supplies, while quietly knowing the truth: the Kremlin's pipeline project was rushed, corrupt, and incapable of delivering what it promised. The more they repeat excuses, the less the population believes them. When people are thirsty, propaganda doesn't quench their needs. Strategically, the failure also weakens Russia's grip on the occupied territories. Control is not just about military checkpoints or soldiers with guns. It's about providing the basics: food, shelter, electricity, and water. When these collapse, control collapses too. A thirsty population is not a loyal one. Discontent simmers in households, in markets, and in workplaces, and it can eventually turn into open resistance. Internationally, this crisis further damages Russia's image. While Moscow boasts about building new cities and investing in occupied lands, the images tell a different story: citizens carrying buckets, hospitals without running water, factories standing idle. For Ukraine and its Western allies, this is proof they can point to: Russia cannot govern the lands it has taken. It cannot even provide water to the people it claims to liberate. And then there's the military dimension. Armies run on logistics. Soldiers need water as much as civilians. A shortage means weaker morale, strained supply lines, and increased costs to transport water into the front lines. In some cases, the Russian army itself competes with civilians for the same limited supplies, a recipe for resentment and conflict within its own ranks. This crisis, then, is not just about a broken canal. It's about the cracks in Russia's political authority, its strategic control, and its ability to project power. And those cracks are widening every single day. The water crisis in Russia's occupied territories is not just a temporary inconvenience. It is a strategic wound that could shape the future of this war and the political balance of the entire region. When water disappears, unrest begins. And when unrest collides with war, the consequences can spiral beyond control. First, let's look at the immediate future for the people on the ground. 2 million residents are already struggling without clean water, relying on bottled supplies, truck deliveries, or wells that are quickly running dry. In summer, this shortage could escalate into a full-scale humanitarian catastrophe. Diseases linked to dirty water, cholera, dysentery, hepatitis, could spread like wildfire. Hospitals, already under pressure, would be overwhelmed. In a war zone, a health crisis is not just tragic, it is destabilizing. A society cannot function if its people are sick, thirsty, and angry. Second, the crisis threatens political stability inside Russia's own system. The Kremlin has spent years portraying itself as a strong, capable state, one that restores order where chaos once existed. But the water shortage exposes the opposite: weakness, disorganization, and corruption. If Moscow cannot provide the most basic human need, water, what else is it failing to deliver? This question will not remain confined to Donbass. It could echo inside Russia itself, where citizens already face economic strain, rising costs, and international isolation. Every broken promise abroad becomes a mirror for discontent at home. Now, consider the strategic implications on the battlefield. Armies cannot fight without logistics. Water is as critical to soldiers as fuel or ammunition. The Russian military will be forced to divert resources just to secure drinking supplies for its troops. Convoys carrying water instead of weapons are convoys that weaken Russia's overall war machine. The more stretched these supply lines become, the more vulnerable they are to Ukrainian attacks. In short, water scarcity could erode Russia's military endurance over time. Meanwhile, for Ukraine and its Western allies, this crisis opens a door. Diplomatically, they can highlight Russia's failures, using them to rally international support. Every image of children collecting water from broken pipes, every report of hospitals without clean supplies, strengthens Ukraine's case that Russia cannot govern. Strategically, Kiev might exploit local discontent. An angry, thirsty population is far less likely to support the occupying power and far more likely to resist, openly or quietly. In modern war, hearts and minds matter as much as tanks and drones. But the consequences go even further, into the global geopolitical arena. Water crises have historically triggered migrations, unrest, and even revolutions. If Donbass becomes unlivable, thousands could flee, straining neighboring regions and countries. The world will watch as one of the 21st century's most resource-rich nations fails to manage the simplest resource: water. This will not only damage Russia's reputation, but also weaken its leverage with partners like China, India, and African states, where Moscow has been pushing for influence. Who trusts a power that cannot hydrate its own people? And then comes the long-term question: what happens if this crisis drags on for years? Infrastructure takes time to rebuild, especially under sanctions and war. If Russia cannot solve this within months, the Donbas could face a permanent state of scarcity. Businesses will shut down, agriculture will collapse, young people will leave, What remains will be an aging, angry, and unstable population. Hardly the new Russian territories that Putin once promised. The bottom line is this: the water crisis is not just a local disaster. It is a strategic vulnerability that reaches across humanitarian, political, military, and global dimensions. Every day it continues, Russia grows weaker, not only in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of its own people. And history tells us something chilling: empires often fall not because of one great battle, but because of internal cracks that spread quietly, until one day they cannot be contained. The empty taps of Donbas may one day be remembered as one of those cracks.